following video is intended for mature audiences. It contains horror elements, adult themes, and language that might not be suitable for younger viewers. Deck the halls. As twilight bled into the horizon, the Christmas tree farm transformed into an ethereal wonderland. Pines, frosted with fresh snowfall, stood in grandeur, their branches sagging under the weight of winter's white blanket. It was picture perfect, a scene ripped straight from a holiday card or plucked from one of those Hallmark movies Karen adored before our love crumbled like stale gingerbread. Back in those days of make-believe when we thought we could mend our splintering family with strands of tinsel and the rhythm of age-old traditions. If only I'd known what horrors waited beneath that pristine blanket of snow, patient as winter itself. The temperature had been dropping steadily since we arrived, our breath crystallizing in clouds that hung motionless in the unnaturally still air. The sun was sinking faster than it should, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe and twist between the endless rows of trees. But Claudia didn't notice any of this. She was too excited about picking out her first Christmas tree for her new room at my place. Claudia tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide with excitement behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Can we get that one, Daddy?" She pointed to a towering blue spruce, at least 9 feet tall. Her enthusiasm made my chest ache. These monthly visits were all I had left after Karen won primary custody, and I was determined to make each one count. Even if it meant driving an hour to this remote tree farm Claudia had found online, insisting it had the most perfect trees ever. I should have wondered why the website had no reviews, no photos of happy families, just an address and a cryptic promise. "Find the tree that's meant for you." I chuckled, attempting to ignore the hollow feeling in my stomach. Bit big for the living room, don't you think? I didn't mention that my small apartment could barely fit a 6-footer, another reminder of how far I'd fallen from our old life in the suburbs. Claudia pouted, adjusting her red wool coat, the one Karen had bought her for Christmas last year when we were still a family. Then she darted off toward another tree, her long dark braids bouncing against her back. I followed, axe in hand, breath misting in the cold air. The weight of the tool felt wrong somehow, like it was getting heavier with each step, the metal growing colder than the winter air could explain. We wandered deeper into the farm, past the carefully manicured rows near the entrance. The trees here were different, older, twisted things with branches that seemed to reach for us as we passed. Their needles were a darker green, almost black in the fading light, and they swayed slightly despite the lack of wind. The crowds had thinned out gradually, then disappeared entirely. An uneasy feeling crept over me, a primal warning that something wasn't right. The silence was the first thing I noticed. No distant chatter of other families, no crunch of snow under tires from the parking lot. Even the wind had died, leaving us in a pocket of absolute stillness that made my ears ring. The air smelled wrong too, not the fresh pine scent from earlier, but something older, like wet earth and decay. "Claudia," I called, my voice sounding flat and dead in the frozen air. "Let's head back. It's getting dark." I checked my phone for the time, but the screen was black. Dead battery? No. The cold seemed to have killed it completely. I got no response from Claudia, so I called again. "Claudia?" Panic rose in my throat, bitter as bile. I spun around, searching. Nothing but endless rows of trees, their branches seeming to reach for me in the growing gloom. Had they moved closer? I could have sworn the path behind us was wider just moments ago. The trees seemed to have shifted, creating a maze of narrow corridors that all looked the same. A giggle, faint, carried on a wind that shouldn't exist in this unnatural stillness. It sounded like Claudia, but distorted somehow, as if heard underwater or through thick glass. I ran toward the sound, branches whipping my face, leaving stinging cuts that felt more like claw marks than scratches. The needles seemed to reach for me, drawing blood that froze almost instantly in the rapidly dropping temperature. A Another giggle. Behind me now. I whirled, the axe slipping from my numb fingers and disappearing into the snow with a muffled thud that sounded far too wet. The loss of my only weapon sent a fresh wave of terror through me. At that moment, I realized I'd been gripping it not to cut down a tree, but because some part of me had sensed the wrongness of this place from the start. A flash of red coat disappeared behind a massive trunk, but something was wrong with how she moved, jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. The color of her coat seemed too bright against the twilight, more like fresh blood than wool. "This isn't funny," I shouted, my voice echoing in the eerie silence. "Come out right now." I tried to sound stern and authoritative, like a father should, but fear made my voice crack. The wind returned with sudden violence, howling through the trees with a sound too much like screaming. Snow swirled around me, obscuring my vision, but in the chaos, I caught glimpses of things that shouldn't be there. Faces in the bark, shadows moving against the wind, and worst of all, tiny footprints in the snow filling with something dark and wet that glistened like sap but smelled like old copper. I stumbled forward, disoriented, fighting the rising hysteria. The temperature had dropped so drastically that each breath felt like swallowing glass, the air so cold it burned my lungs. My foot caught on something solid beneath the snow. I went down hard, face first into the white powder that no longer felt like snow at all. It was too warm, too sticky, with a metallic taste that made me gag. Pushing myself up, I turned to ascertain what I'd tripped over. The scream froze in my throat. A pale and lifeless hand protruded from the snow. The fingers were locked in a grasping position, and the wrist bore a familiar bracelet. The charm bracelet I'd given Karen on our 10th anniversary, just months before everything fell apart. Each charm represented a year of our marriage, ending with a tiny silver heart that matched the one Claudia wore on a chain around her neck. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding. As I watched, the snow began to shift. More hands emerged. Arms, torsos, bodies. Dozens of them rose from their wintry graves. Men, women, children, all wearing tattered Christmas sweaters and Santa hats, their flesh bearing the marks of prolonged exposure to cold. Blackened fingers, frost-burned cheeks, blue-tinged lips pulled back in rictus grins. Some wore wedding rings that glinted dully in the fading light. Others clutched small toys or fragments of Christmas decorations, eternal reminders of the holiday joy they'd sought here. Their eyes opened in unison. "Welcome," they sang in a horrifying chorus that made my teeth vibrate and my bones ache. "We've been waiting for you. All of us who came looking for the perfect tree. All of us who wanted to make Christmas special again, to make our families whole." I attempted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Glancing down, I watched as pale hands gripped my ankles, pulling me down into the snow. The flesh of the hands was marked with dozens of tiny puncture wounds like something had burrowed through them, and in some spots, small evergreen needles sprouted from the frozen skin. "Claudia!" I screamed one last time, my voice hoarse with terror. "Where are you?" A small figure stepped out from behind a massive pine. My daughter. But her eyes. Oh God. Her eyes were glowing red like the others, and her skin had taken on the waxy translucence of deep frozen meat. Clusters of tiny branches and needles had sprouted from where her mittened hands once were, resembling sharp claws. Her braids had become woody vines that writhed and twisted in the Arctic air. "I'm right here, Daddy," she said, her voice distorted and inhuman, resonating with the sound of cracking ice and splintering wood. "I found the perfect tree for us. It's been so lonely, you see. It needs a family, just like I did after you left. But now we can be together forever, just like you promised." She gestured behind her. What I had thought was a pine tree slowly unfurled. Branches became arms, dozens of them, each tipped with needles sharp as razors. The trunk twisted and stretched into a grotesque body that towered above us, bark splitting to reveal pulsing amber sap that dripped like honey onto the snow, melting it to reveal more bodies beneath, perfectly preserved in the frozen earth. Generations of lost souls, all seeking the perfect Christmas now part of its eternal collection. Its bark-covered face split into a grin full of icicle teeth, and in its features, I saw a hideous reflection of my own. This was what had been calling to us all along, drawing broken families to this cursed place, with the promise of perfect Christmas memories. It fed not on flesh or blood, but on the desperate longing for connection, for the warmth of holidays past. "Merry Christmas," it rumbled, its voice the sound of avalanches and splitting wood. "You'll never have to leave her again. No more custody battles, no more lonely holidays, just one perfect, endless Christmas." As I sank into the snow, surrounded by the undead chorus of "Deck the Halls," sung in voices cracked by frost and decay, I realized the horrible truth that all these other lost souls had discovered too late. We hadn't come to choose a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree had chosen us, adding us to its eternal forest family, another set of decorations for its ever-growing collection of broken homes made whole again in death. Each light on its branches was a captured soul, each ornament a frozen heart. In the distance, I heard car doors slamming and voices calling out in excitement. New customers arriving at the farm, new families searching for the perfect tree, drawn by the same mysterious website that had lured us here. The last thing I saw before the snow closed over my face was Claudia's twisted form, skipping away between the trees, her branch fingers beckoning to the newcomers, leading them deeper into the forest where the perfect tree waited to welcome them home. Forever. And somewhere in that eternal winter night, a computer screen glows with a new review on the tree farm's website. "Found the perfect tree. Will never leave." Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time. Thank you for watching.